All right. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Tim Hinkle. I'm an assistant commissioner at the Minnesota DOT, and I currently chair the AASHTO's Committee on Performance Management. Thanks, everybody, for joining today's session, and welcome to the joint AASHTO Committee on Performance-Based Management and the Transportation Pooled Fund quarterly meeting. I always like to take advantage early in the meeting to thank all of those that are involved in these important activities. So let me start by saying a special thank you to the vice chair, Christos Xenofontos, who will be taking over the reins today a little bit later in the meeting, as unfortunately I have a conflict and will need to relinquish that role. So thanks, Christos, for all you do, as well as for taking over the meeting today when I have to depart. And thanks to all of the technical subcommittees of the AASHTO committee, the work group chairs, the co-chairs, the vice chairs, all of the members. Just too many volunteers to name specifically, but we couldn't do any of this without your assistance. And we couldn't do any of this without the assistance of Dr. Matt Hardy from AASHTO, our AASHTO liaison, who will not be with us today as he is taking a short sabbatical, some much deserved time off. I believe he is actually hiking somewhere in New Mexico. So hopefully he's enjoying his time away and spending some quality time with his scouting son. I think they do a lot of work via Time Together for the Scouts, doing some of that in the area of New Mexico. And finally, a really important partnership to thank. FHWA is always partnering with AASHTO and the Committee on Performance-Based Management, as well as TPM pooled fund members. In fact, I think it's important to note, maybe Steve will talk about this later if he gets a chance in the regular meeting, but the Office of Stewardship at FHWA, Oversight and Management is the actual title, in which the Transportation Performance Management and Asset Management teams are housed, has recently reorganized. And the TPM and the Asset Management teams have merged under Steve Gay. Congratulations, Steve. Susanna Reck, who all of us have worked with in the performance arena, has now assumed the lead of a new enterprise performance management team. And that team is going to focus on enterprise risk management and the unit performance planning. I just want to take advantage of this to thank Susanna for her partnership over the years, and again to welcome Steve. Congratulations.
Thank you, Tim.
All right. You're welcome, Steve. For those of you that haven't been involved in this particular meeting, I will tell you that the purpose of this quarterly web call is to share AASHTO and committee information and to provide updates with the membership of the Committee on Performance-Based Management with the TPM pooled fund members, as well as to get input on performance management needs. Thanks to all of you that are new to this particular session, and thanks to those of you that have been involved historically and are returning. Before we get into the agenda, just a few logistical reminders. First, links to the notes and slides from today's web call will be posted on the TPM Pooled Fund web portal at tpm-portal.com and distributed to all attendees after today's call. Also, this is an open mic session, so I'll remind those of you that are just joining, and those of you that have been on, mute, please, as you will be in control of any disturbances that you did not intend. And if you have any questions or comments during today's session, use the control panel or unmute yourself and speak up, and we will try to call on you with any question or comment that you might have. And finally, it's really not just us talking at you. This is a Q&A, an open discussion, learning opportunities, informational opportunities. So please participate actively, as we need your input as well as your questions help us to understand what priorities we should have moving forward. All right, I'm not seeing any questions so far, so I'm going to jump in to the agenda and just quickly review it so everybody understands what it is we need to accomplish today. First up on the agenda will be FHWA. I think Nelson Hoffman and Vicki Miller from FHWA are going to provide an update on the FHWA TPM dashboard. And this is a product that reports information and makes available to the states that information, and really importantly incorporates the TPM data that your agencies have submitted as a part of our requirements to meet the TPM overall direction and requirements. Then we have the privilege of Mara Campbell with Jacobs going to provide us with a feature presentation on the final guidance from NCHRP, the project 813, which was titled Integrating Effective Transportation Performance, Risk, and Asset Management Practices. And again, this will be another opportunity for Q&A. So I think Mara is going to provide us a quick presentation, and then we will get into some discussion of the products of that particular research. After we get through those two topics, we will move into the CPBM business meeting portion of the agenda. We'll get updates from each of the subcommittees and the work groups. And then finally, as we always do, we'll move into a brief TPM pooled fund update. That is a lot to cover in a short period of time, but it is what we will cover in that time. And as I said, I'll depart early. Christos will help to make sure that we cover all of that territory and to the extent possible end on time. Not seeing any questions or comments, so I think we're right on schedule, and I will move us right into the first topic on the agenda, which is the FHWA dashboards and reports. Thanks to Nelson and Vicki. Let me turn it over to you and see if you can jump into your presentation today. Welcome.
Thank you, Tim. This is Steve from Federal Highway, and just a couple opening comments. Like Tim mentioned, Federal Highway reorganized, with Susanna moving over to the Enterprise Performance Management, and we have combined the Asset Management and Performance Management teams, but are now being called the Performance and Asset Management team. And I think it was a good logical fit, and I think the key as we move ahead, and I think the timing is good, especially as we move to the 2022 TAMPs for those involved with asset management. And we're looking at the 2022 target setting, and all that. You know, looking at how we've done the last 4 years. Are we using the data we have and using the TPM program for improved decision making? And I think that's the key foundation we have to remember. We now have better data, more information, dashboards, etc. How are DOTs using this information for more accountability in how they spend money? With that, I'm going to pass it to Bill, and Bill and Nelson will be presenting. Bill, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Steve. If we could move to the next slide, please. So Nelson will be doing a little tour of the TPM dashboard, but before we get into that, I just want to quickly share with you how FHWA is messaging and presenting the dashboard. So we've now done several of the annual reporting cycles for the safety measures, and we've completed the baseline and the mid-period reporting for the non-safety measures. And so with that, all of us are working together and learning from the performance reporting process and from the data that we're beginning to get in through that process. So the message we want to convey to stakeholders is that first, the performance management process is complete. It's complete in that all 52 state DOTs are meeting all of the reporting requirements, reporting their performance data and their target information. So that's really a great success. And FHWA is gathering all of that information and sharing it in one place in a transparent manner that is easily accessible. And that's what you'll be seeing from Nelson in just a minute. Second, the performance reporting process is accountable. State DOTs are responsible for coordinating with their MPOs and other stakeholders and for setting their own targets for each of the 17 measures. On the federal highway side, we are committed to helping the state succeed by providing the necessary guidance on the regs and training and technical assistance. And finally, the performance reporting process is consistent. So before we had the TPM program, there was lots of great stuff going on among different states with performance management. But we now have a consistent process with 17 measures that are consistent across the entire country. That's allowing us to do a better job of tracking performance and benchmarking performance. And FHWA is able to do a better job of telling a national performance story thanks to that consistency. So with that,
Bill, can I stop you for 1 second? Please,
Yeah.
Somebody is not muted. So let me remind you, please mute if you are not presenting or asking a question. Steve, I think that's you. Steve, can you mute, please?
No, I'm muted.
Thanks, Steve. Sorry. All right, Bill, I apologize. Continue.
Bill, this is Perry. I'm going to mute everybody, and then you'll have to unmute yourself,
okay.
Bill, and then you can get going.
Okay, this is Bill. You can hear me now?
Loud and clear. Thanks, Bill.
Okay, thanks. So just I guess to quickly summarize, we're looking at the performance reporting process being complete and accountable and consistent. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Nelson Hoffman so he can give you guys a brief tour of the TPM dashboard.
Great, thank you, Bill, and Steve, thank you. Tim had mentioned that this was going to be a presentation by me and Vicki Miller. We made some last-minute switches showing the federal highway flexibility. That was it. So we could probably spend a long time, touring the TPM dashboard. As we're pretty excited. Now, this is the information that has come in from the state DOTs, as Bill was saying, and Tim also, that this is the compilation of all of the information that has been submitted to federal highways. And there's lots of information here. And what I'm going to do is just highlight some of the changes that have taken place through this most recent update. So could someone just, I'm assuming that everybody can see my screen. Is that correct?
Yes.
Great, thank you, Tim. All right, I just want to, so this is the actual state performance dashboard and reports that Federal Highways hosts. And I just want to show that this is the TPM, Federal Highways TPM site with many other great resources and information. And below here is where the dashboard and reports resides. So you can get to all of the states. It's part of the reporting and transparency. And we're going to go to Pennsylvania as our site. So this, when you click on one of the states, it brings you to this location. And again, I'm just going to highlight, this is going to look familiar to a lot of folks who've been to these sites before, but I'm just going to highlight some of the changes that have been made. We're going to go to the highway reliability site, and I'm going to scroll down, and you'll notice that the graphs that we've been using have been changed. We had this format for the safety performance measures, and it's now throughout the site because we think it provides a little bit of a better view of the data. So something that is new for this update is significant progress determinations for the PM2 and PM3, the infrastructure and system performance measures. And it's down at the bottom, but I'm not going to give us all a motion sickness, and I'm just going to click on this site and it takes us to the bottom. So we're here in highway reliability, and so this is focusing on the area, the two performance measures associated with this for the significant progress. But I'm going to scroll us back up to the top of this area, and you can see the full significant progress determination table for the 6 performance measures in PM2 and PM3 on this one table. So I'm going to head back to the landing page for Pennsylvania, and if we were to go to the safety tile, and it brings us to the safety performance measures, and again we have a site that brings us down to the safety performance target assessment and the information down at the bottom. So we've strived for some consistency between these parts of the dashboard. So another area I want to focus on is that during the mid-performance period progress report that was submitted by the state DOTs to Federal Highways, there was an opportunity for making, I'm going to go backwards, for making adjustments to the 4-year targets. So again, we're back at highway reliability, and I'm going to scroll down, and I just want to highlight in addition to just the numerical data that we've displayed on the dashboard, is also the narrative information that supports the numerical data. And there's 4 tabs: the basis for targets, the 2-year progress being that has been made. And in this case, the 4-year target was adjusted, and this is the basis for the 4-year target adjustment. And there's a couple of things to say about this. One, if the state DOT had not adjusted the target for this particular measure, this would just be an NA. But also to say that I'm going to scroll up to the graph is that the 4-year target that is displayed on this graph is the adjusted target. So we made a decision to not include the original target and just update with the adjusted target to provide the most current information. And so that's what is shown. If a target wasn't adjusted for performance measure, then this would be blank, but the target would all be the same. I'm going to go back to the main page again, and I just want to highlight for folks that the UZAs, the urbanized areas, one can get to all 32 of the urbanized areas by clicking down to the bottom of the page to look at the performance measures associated with those urbanized areas, or We're going to go back to Pennsylvania. And this is, again, consistent with before, but I just wanted to highlight this, is that there's more information down here. You can click on the urbanized areas in this location. And I also wanted to highlight all of the other interesting documents that can be linked from this page. So the last highlight that I want to share with folks before we end this tour is that under the infrastructure tile, we scroll down into the non-interstate performance measures, pavement performance measures. And based on some feedback we received from state DOTs, we are showing both full distress plus IRI charts and tables and information, as well as a table for IRI only. And underneath these two charts, there's information behind the data that explains why we have provided both of these two tables. So I really encourage everyone to head to this dashboard, especially if you've seen it before, even if you haven't seen it before. There's lots of very good information that was provided by the state DOTs to federal highways as part of the biennial reporting, and also for safety through the Highway Safety Improvement Program, HSIP, and valuable information here. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and turn it back to Perry. Actually, I'm sorry, turn it back to Steve with the wrap up of our last slide.
Hey, just in closing, just Federal Highway recognizes the tremendous amount of work by all the stakeholders to make this TPM dashboard a reality. Thank you for all your efforts making it possible. Also, Federal Highway is working to provide resources and to make the annual HSIP annual reporting in the 2022 full and baseline performance-based reporting as smooth as possible. Thank y'all. Back to you, Tim.
Thanks, Steve, Bill, and Nelson. Very much appreciated. The floor is now open for any questions on the material provided or any questions that you might have in general on the dashboard and reports and data, etc. As I open up the floor for questions, I'll go to the chat box first, and I see what looks like a question from Andrew. He says, on PM, what guidance will FHWA provide for the 2020 filing on how COVID impacts those measures? Any perspectives, Nelson, Steve, or Bill?
Yeah, this is Nelson. Steve, please add in as needed. I think that the question on the impacts of COVID, I think it's, for us, it's still sort of on our team, is still an open question, and Federal Highways is an open question, and I think that there's lots of conversation underway, but I can't say sort of definitively what the direction that we're going to be going with that is at this time.
Hey, Nelson, this is Pete. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Just to add on, Pete Stefanos from Federal Highway. Many states did use the opportunity in adjusting their targets to reference the impact of COVID and what they're anticipating will be their performance, at the end point of this first performance period. So there was already an opportunity through the adjustment of the targets to reflect the impacts of COVID in the target setting. And many states, if you go through and you look at some of the comments on how states discussed why they adjust their target, many referred to the impacts of COVID. And then we have, as you know, when states report on actually their ability to hit a target, when it will come to the end of the first performance period, they can identify an extenuating circumstance that prevented them from delivering the program that they had intended to deliver. And so if you have any questions about that, certainly reach out to us. There are some, specific allowances that are in the regulation for an extenuating circumstance, and that it isn't wide open. So it does need to impact sort of your ability to deliver the program, or the ability for us to furnish you information that you would need in order to meet the targets that you thought you were trying to hit. So and as Nelson mentioned, so we're still sort of evaluating beyond that. What could we possibly do? That's something we can't really discuss until we get some clearance in that area. But those are some opportunities you have now.
Thanks, Pete. Andrew, if you have any follow-up, just let me know. Any other questions? Any other comments for FHWA? Karen does add in the chat box, thanks for the consistency in following the safety template, as well as the flexibility to include more information. She felt it was very helpful. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions or hearing anybody. So thanks again to FHWA for that update. I am moving back to the agenda, and the next topic on our agenda is the feature presentation. It's my pleasure to again welcome Mara Campbell with Jacobs, who is going to be covering this topic. The topic is the final guidance from NCHRP's Project 08-113, which is the titled Integrating Effective Transportation Performance, Risk, and Asset Management Practices. Please note that after Mara provides her presentation, there will be time for Q&A. Feel free to type any questions or comments you have in the chat box, or be ready to raise your hand and chime in if you have questions or comments after the presentation. With that, Mara, the floor is yours. Welcome. Mara, you must be on mute. Perry may need to unmute you.
Yeah, and Mara, I can help with that, but I think you'll have to see if you can push the button on your end. You may need to try to switch back over to your computer
I
audio.
think, Mara, you might have to call in like you did before, because I think that's why we were able to hear you at the beginning.
I'd have to say, this is Pete. This is one of the first times I've heard Mara silenced.
We're all being silent right now, Pete.
All right, Mara, if you're
it was
able to
working
hear
before
us.
we tested it, and and she came in loud and clear.
Yes, you should try punching in #135#. Unmute yourself.
Nope, we can't hear you. Oh, now try.
Good.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, it sounds wonderful. Sorry for the trouble.
Okay, all right. Hey, well, that's great. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody today real quickly about this project. It's actually a really good project, and I think many of you will gain a lot of insights from it. So thank you very much for your time today, and I'll kind of quickly try to gain some momentum since we had the little technical difficulty. So today, real quick, I wanted to share with you why integration is so important. On the next slide, you can see kind of a quick agenda and kind of the fundamental agency questions for integration, why an integration framework has identified 5 key areas and how those key areas can actually help you all. I want to talk briefly about an integration maturity assessment, how you can go about developing a roadmap, and then some key observations and how to use an integrated guidance. So we're going to get all that done in 15 minutes. So it'll be kind of quick. All right, so on the next slide, really, I wanted to highlight why integrate. So this research project actually gave us the opportunity to really test drive the guidance with 5 agencies, 4 state agencies and a transit agency. And out of all of those interviews, out of all of this project, I mean, the bottom line is, this is the reason why you would and should be considering to integrate your asset, performance, and risk management activities. It's just going to help you make better decisions. It's going to improve capital planning. It's going to improve system performance and resiliency. And frankly, it's going to optimize kind of your position, let you utilize your people more effectively, and then kind of get everybody moving in the same direction. So some of the fundamental questions on the next slide that I think you've got to ask yourself when you integrate management practices is, are those 3 management styles still siloed and separated in your organization? And do you want a more collaborative effort? Is your agency able to really access and share data across the enterprise? And are those data and process owners, do they understand who the other people are, and do they understand those business processes? And then I think the last big question you have to ask yourself is, how is project and operational risk being incorporated into your agency's investment strategy? So these are kind of the realities that we really identified in this research, that if you are in concurrence that you want to do all those things better and well, integrating performance, asset, and risk management is absolutely your next best and most productive step. And in the next slide, you can kind of see where the sweet spot is. So do you have to stop doing asset management? No. Are you going to ever stop doing performance management? I sure hope not. That's near and dear to my heart. And do you need to do better risk management? Yes. But all of that needs to be taking place, but there's this nice little sweet spot that the integrated efforts will really help you drive better overall agency performance. Because what it does is it allows you to kind of maximize synergies within those 3 buckets around process, data, and staffing. So those are the key areas of why integration is so important. So why this research, I think, is something that I hope each one of you will kind of grasp and review. On the next slide, you'll see that very soon this research is going to be coming out. And unfortunately, it is not out yet. We expect it to be out in a pre-version within the next 4 to 6 weeks, and hopefully completely available to everybody by that August, September timeline. But if you are ready to maximize your business processes, have your staffing be more efficient, better understand your data, if you're ready to do that, this research will help you take those steps to kind of mature your agency toward this more integrated effort. And that is really kind of what we accomplished in this research. We were able to come up with a practical guidance, a maturity assessment, and a way and a kind of a framework for you to identify where you are, identify how you're doing in all these different buckets, and then what is the logical next step for you to take in this journey. And as you'll note on the next slide, I want to point out there are 5 key areas for management integration. And this is really where you're going to get your bang. The real reason and the crux behind the value of the integration is this framework. And we go into detail in the research on how this framework should work. But there is really consistency that kind of links all of those together. So you've really got to have these 5 areas for management integration understood in performance management, in asset management, and in risk management, and then pull it all together to find that sweet spot. And those 5 areas are approaches to integration. So how can we do it? Data and software, personnel and skills, policy and agency structure. Are you set up to do it? And if not, how do you tweak your agency? And then what are the resource requirements that's needed to actually do it? And you can see some of the quotes that we pulled from the actual folks that participated in our guidance recommendations and celebration as we help them create their roadmap. So, so if on the next slide, so you might ask, well, you know, all right, I do all of these, we do all this stuff. I'm not sure integration is it maybe the next step, but if it is the next step, how do I actually benefit from it, and what do I actually do? And I think the guidance that we're going to put forth and that you'll be able to access soon will be able to walk you through that. But I do want to step back for a minute and share with you that, you know what, there is no silver bullet here. This guidance is going to walk you through a journey of how to get there and how to do it better. But every one of you are unique in your own ways. You're set up in your own ways. You do business in your own ways. And so there is not a specific way to do it that's right or wrong. It's a unique journey. But I will tell you that if you take this journey, what it will help do, without a doubt, and we have documented evidence of these 5 different agencies that went along this journey with us, and those will also be available for you, is that it will help improve cross-department conversations. It will help you identify your gaps. It will absolutely help you identify strategies for moving forward. And then it will help also in terms of understanding your agency maturity. Now let's talk about that for a quick second. So maturity assessments, they've been around, and on the next slide you'll see that they all kind of sound alike and look alike. But this one in particular I'm very proud of because I think it actually identifies more specifically, are you here in your journey or are you here? And it gives you very specific identification of if you're doing these kinds of things, you're here. If you're doing these things, you're here. And it's also a self-assessment. So you don't have to have somebody come in and do it for you, and it's not a proprietary thing. It's basically you just sit down in a room with your colleagues and you do some true kind of self-reflection. And I think if you will do this, and use this guide as your kind of way to facilitate that, you will absolutely be able to identify not only what you need to do, but frankly, some of the challenges that remain. And that's actually on the next slide. What I wanted to share with you is I think the biggest benefit you would get out of this research is if you will take that assessment and really have some honest conversations internally, you will be able to create and develop an integration roadmap that says, you know what, we're here, but we want to get here. So how do we take what we're doing and create these time-bound goals, strategies, action plans, and create an optimized way to integrate everything that we are doing within your state agency in terms of performance, risk, and asset management. So on the next slide, you're going to see kind of the front cover of what this final guidance is going to look like. I love it. But I think I just like the colors, to be honest. But this guidance is really developed around those 5 key areas. And it's going to be able, again, for you all to see, review, and read. We hope in that pre-release within the next few weeks, and then formally out there for everybody by maybe that September timeline. But we really think that the guidance will help you understand the how to integrate philosophy. So it will provide you with some frameworks. It will give you some strategies. It will give you the benefits of integration. And kind of share with you some challenges that some of these agencies that participated in our roadmap exercise identified. It will also give you a checklist to assess your level of maturity in all of those, based on your existing practices in all of those 5 key areas. So on the next slide, I wanted to share with you those agencies that actually participated in our test drive of the guidance. So we took our guidance and we took all of those elements and we sat down with Caltrans, UDOT, VTrans, Minnesota DOT, and TriMet, which is a transit agency in Oregon. And we sat down with them and literally went through our guidance. And they came up with their own roadmaps. So we test drove it. There's going to be case studies, examples, common challenges, implementation ideas that you might be able to extrapolate from what you see within the guidance, and then be able to work on your own integration process and journey. So we really encourage you to use all of what's already been done to create your own roadmap. Here's some general key observations from the research on the next slide. And that is, and this should not be a surprise to you guys. You guys clearly understand what it takes to drive performance, to have a robust asset management plan, and to also do risk management, right? So you get it, but it is absolutely, unequivocally, the most important thing is to have a champion for it. Somebody that's going to drive that change. And also have leadership be willing to change the culture of the agency to want to achieve those efficiencies of integration. So you've got to have a culture within your DOT to be able to say, you know what, yeah, we're going to be more agile. We're going to take some of this and we're going to make it happen. And then I think the other thing is, I think your agency probably will have to have and be willing to have some common standards and data terminology and kind of a data governance way of thinking and processes within your agency. So those were some of the key observations. Other key observations I wanted just to kind of elaborate on the next slide is, and I mentioned this earlier, but you absolutely have to have executive buy-in. Organizationally, you're likely set up to be siloed, right? You got a performance group, you got an asset management group, you got a risk group, and maybe they talk, maybe they don't. So you've got to have that executive level buy-in. There also, again, you really are going to have to re-engineer your business processes. You're going to have to think differently and work differently to enable integration. And if the agency isn't willing to do that, then it's probably not going to be very effective. And then, honestly, I have to be honest, I think you've got to have that champion, you know, that change agent within your agency to really create motivation and the desire to want to integrate, and then be willing to standardize some of the methods of how they go about determining, you know, asset deterioration or performance goals or whatever. So you're going to have to think and be willing and be motivated to work outside of what you've always done and the way you've always thought, and actually broaden that, break down those walls, and think about risk, and think about performance, and think about other things besides what you've typically thought about. Last but not least, I wanted to identify some other quick observations, and I realize my time is running out, so I'll try to hurry, Tim, I promise. Again, I want to reiterate the importance of the enterprise standards. I think the only way to really integrate good business processes, data, communication, resource sharing is to have this kind of enterprise system. Data governance, obviously a huge pivotal issue that will make or break you in integration in terms of strengths and barriers. And then this ongoing discussion of data needs and access to support the evolution of this integrated framework. And then, of course, building policy and building momentum around a framework that actually creates the excitement and the need and the value add for why we want to integrate. So those were some of the key observations from the research. On the next slide, I want to share with you some next steps. And so if we'll go on to the next one, here's what I leave you with. Get a copy of that guidance. Hopefully it'll all be out within the next few weeks. And but read it. Use the maturity self-assessment. Create you a roadmap. Go through the process and utilize it. And then guess what? Create the roadmap, work the roadmap, and then 6 to 9 months down the road, take the maturity self-assessment again, or on some type of a periodic basis. So you are always continuously improving. But I am very confident that this will help you if you want to integrate and see some real true value add in the areas of performance management, risk management, and asset management. So thank you guys for your time. If you have any questions, Tim, I'm happy to answer those at this time, but I know we're running short on time. So.
Mara, thank you so much for this presentation. This was really good, and actually it even sets up our next discussion. But before we move on to our next discussion, we do want to see if we have any questions. We'll start with the chat. We have one from Kelly saying, thank you, Mara. Each time I've heard the presentation for this guidance document, I get more excited to get our hands on it. So, you know, again, let's share the link in the chat if possible so that people can grab it and see if we can find it. Kelly's looking for assisted DOT for a sneak peek of their roadmap, and that's directed at you, Diana. But any other questions, please, for Mara? Hearing none. Mara, any last thoughts?
No, just thank you guys. And if you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And Deanna, thank you. I'm glad you like my voice. See you guys. And I'll be on the call, so if there's any other questions later on, just holler at me.
All right, Mara, again, thank you so much for the excellent discussion. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna transition to a discussion on new performance measures. And you know, this is something that as the Committee on Performance-Based Management, it's dear to all of our hearts as to how we can continuously evolve and become better over time. And we're also wanted to have this as we're gonna go through some, Yana and I are gonna go through some questions. And this, we really want to approach this as more of a roundtable discussion where we want people to participate. So next slide, please. So just to set the stage, and you know, as I said earlier, I think Mara has done really, really well, particularly where he had the slide about the integration framework with our own agencies. What we know for sure is that our transportation agencies are changing, and not only they're changing, but we really do need to be changing. there is a lot of external factors that we are all going through right now, whether it's technology advancement and disruptive and emerging technologies, legislation, regulation, and how it ties to our funding, the evolution of our workforce, the shifts in in the DOT roles and the focus, and the public expectations. And there are also a lot of new priorities that are emerging as a result of that. And the new AASHTO strategic plan, touches on a lot of those. The other part that we have seen, and this is something that it's also seen in Europe and in Australia and in other parts of the world, is that customers are more demanding and less patient than that they have been before. And as Mara's work also highlighted, our agencies now need to be agile and nimble. We need to have a lot of agility and nimbleness as we are moving forward. The other part that we have seen since we started our journey down to performance management, and we evolved from performance management and asset management and risk management to understanding the overall road of performance-based management and how everything fits together, is that we have evolved from the beginning, and we now have a lot more increased capabilities than what we started before. Yana, next. So we wanted to start by putting some of this together in a way where to encourage questions. And we started looking at as to what is driving us as public agencies, and what is in the middle of all of that. And, we call it our North Star, and that really is people and society, or our customers. And around that, you'll see in the bottom layer where we have a lot of the areas that they are closer to us on how we do business right now, that we are more mature in those areas, such as in safety, as in asset management, in stewardship and mobility and air quality. But then there is a lot of areas that we are just beginning the conversation, and how do we measure our performance? When we look at some of the new areas, such as, equity and inclusivity, public value, resilience and sustainability, public health, climate change, and also some of the, new modes as we are going from, we used to be the Department of Public Works, we are now the Department of Transportation, and now we're moving towards the Department of Mobility Management in the future. So as we are looking at all of that, what should we be measuring in order for us to know that we are indeed moving towards succeeding with our overall goals? Next slide, and Yana, it's yours.
All right. So this is our last slide, where we'll just keep it up and have our discussion. And so we're posing these questions to prompt a dialogue with this group on what your thoughts are on new performance measures. So, the first question is, do you think we need new performance measures? And if yes, what areas of a transportation agency needs new measures, and why do they need it? And do the new measures need to relate to a national view? And then what are the greatest challenges you see in implementing the new measures? And what can be done through the AASHTO Committee on Performance-Based Management and the TPM Pooled Fund to make progress with these new measures? So that's a mouthful, but if you could pause and maybe just chime in, unmute yourself, and start with if you think if we need new measures. If you put things in the chat, we'll put that in. Kelly has added the suggestion that in the kind of the beehive strategic framework, that we might add one called accessibility in a cell. Great suggestion. All right.
And I see Daniela is rephrasing the question if we need new decision tools. So I would say performance measurements and decision tools really, go hand in hand. So
yeah, this is Daniela. I just want to kind of challenge you a little bit in not asking for new performance measures, because we need to remember that performance measurement and management is just a tool to do better, in what we're doing. And perhaps asking, so where we are now, what kind of new data tools, decision tools do we need to manage our functions, our agencies better? And I think that might be more at the crux of the issue, right? It's not about metrics. We're not collecting metrics. We're collecting tools to help us manage. So my 5 cents.
Yeah, no, good point. So just kind of frame the question slightly differently. Tonya Norman is stating that the question is, who is the appropriate we? States often find a way to create their own measures for their specific uses. Do we really need measures across states/agencies?
And I think that's part of the conversation that we want to have, whether there is a need for additional performance measures, than the ones that we have now at the national level. And we have heard from Federal Highway almost a month ago that, and continuously hearing that they do want to visit the possibility of new national performance measures in additional areas. So part of what we want to start encouraging here is that we need to start working collaboratively and in cooperation with Federal Highway on some of these. So how do we do it? How do we identify what is important both for states and at the national level for areas to measure?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting at the last TPM webinar that we had back in May, when we had Acting Administrator Pollack and 3 CEOs, maybe 4 CEOs speak, that almost everybody brought up the topic of equity as something that we have to be looking at in TPM. And so what does that mean? And if you, I guess the question about performance management and performance measures is not that necessarily there'll be a performance measure being imposed on states, but more that there are some guidance and standards established to help us all address new topics. So, Andrew.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
This is Jay Stiles. Yeah, just along those lines. I mean, I think that equity piece of inclusivity, I think that we're going to have to start to look at those through different lenses. I think, for example, I think back what we did in the Washington metro area with the express lanes. They were called Lexus lanes for a while because people could buy their way out of congestion. But then when we saw that they worked, all that went away. Well, now I think that's going to come back up again. I think those are types of things that we're going to have to balance, those strategies, congestion pricing, and things like that's been proven to work with these equity issues, and how do we balance one against the other. So I think that's definitely something we'll need to be looking at. Yeah.
Right. It's almost the interplay of across the areas is part of the need.
Yes.
Too. Good point. Christos, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to encourage more people to actually jump in the conversation, and not to be shy.
So Andrew put in chat, in some cases we need to fix the existing ones. TTRI has both data issues and a structural one. Andrew, can you just explain what you mean by that?
Yes, hi, it's Andrew Ludasi from New Jersey DOT. I'm in the Office of Freight Planning. I have done some analysis, and we in fact, this morning we just had a complete team meeting, which includes our local federal highway representatives and MPOs. I didn't present on this one, but I've presented in the past on basically we're required to file this performance measure, which is the Truck Travel Time Reliability Index. And when you analyze it, you know, at a finer level, you find all sorts of things that go in there that aren't clear, that they don't really make sense. It's an imposition in the sense that because of the underlying way the data is structured, I think it would take a lot of analysis to get down, you know, to the, you know, at the deep level, why it says what it says. And the other thing is it's slightly off. In other words, for some reason, there was a determination that the Truck Travel Time Reliability Index is based on a slightly different statistical analysis than it is for cars. And since both vehicles are moving in the same stream together, in a way, it doesn't really make sense. So somebody made this determination when they introduced performance measures, and I'm saying I think that the performance measure itself doesn't work or doesn't tell the correct story, and that we're reporting it and we have to explain it, but it should be changed. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure where in federal highway you go to get federal highway to make that change. And I don't know what the other states see in it as well.
So Andrew, I think what you're posing is if you're looking at that strategic framework, then we need to look holistically at making it all work, which would lead you to are the current ones the right ones?
Exactly.
And are they working?
And I've worked with other people, not just the freight, but you know, they see certain things. They had to explain why there was a very slight, we actually missed a target in New Jersey by 1%. And, you know, they had to explain to Federal Highway why that was. Well, it was very simple. It turned out the next year, there was a lot of construction going on. You know, where there wasn't construction in the previous, I don't know, 3 or 4 years on which the performance measure was based.
Right. Yeah.
This is Scott in North Dakota. I agree with Andrew. You know, there's, I think, an opportunity to allow states to define what performance means on a particular segment and then report the percentage of segments that perform properly or to standards. So for example, the truck travel time reliability measure in a rural state like North Dakota is completely useless for managing our system. But we do have other issues like load carrying capacity, width restrictions, height restrictions, those kinds of things that have exactly the same impacts as a travel time congestion measure does. So in other words, these trucks end up driving literally 100 or more miles out of the way, wasting time, wasting fuel, increasing greenhouse gas emissions, all of those kinds of things, but they're not sitting still, they're driving extra miles. And so I think allowing states, or maybe even requiring states, to define system performance measures that make sense for the traveling public in that state is much more useful for managing the system than having a national measure that is dictated from a specific national perspective.
That's a very good point, because we've looked at these numbers and and other things that they've done at a national level. You know, as you said, rural states end up with a whole set of different performance or problems, and everybody's supposed to base their investment strategies and everything on a national standard. And it doesn't work for a dense state like New Jersey. In some cases, it doesn't work for a state like yours, like North Dakota, which is essentially rural.
Yeah. Great discussion. Holly Beaneman says, I don't think we like new measures, but there are some things we're trying to measure, but having trouble getting our hands on, I'm guessing, on the data. Accessibility is one, equity is another, emission standard for conformity, but something we're looking at statewide as well. So I think, Holly, are you able to unmute? And I just saw that I think she had
I think it's Kelly who's having a hard time unmuting.
Okay, yeah, and I think Holly had to leave. So anyways, but I think yes.
So this is Karen, and you know we've since MAP 21 was implemented in 2012, and I mean, Mama Mia, it's been almost 10 years. It's hard to believe it. I think each and every one of us could wax eloquent on the 28 measures. Is not just the 17 federal highway one, but we've got all the FTA ones we have to collaborate on as well. So we've got these 28 or even more measures, depending on the PTASP modes that some of the transit agencies may have, of what applies and what doesn't apply and what makes sense and what doesn't make sense to us on a state level. You know, to me, the most important thing as we move forward is that Congress doesn't dictate a measure, you know, that Congress may provide the framework and then leave it up to Federal Highway, FTA through the NPRM process, which we were all very involved in, to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly of whatever is being proposed. And in partnership, we all discussed, you know, through the rulemaking, process to come up with the best measures, not those in DC, but those being impacted, because there's always going to be some that have no relevance to many of the states and have great relevance to other states. There's very few national measures that I'm going to make a decision on for my state system, unless it includes everything like safety. So we know we're not going to get more money, so we need to recognize the impact, the great impact this has on us, our local partners, the MPOs and the transit agencies. But if we don't do this all in collaboration, if it's dictated to us, it's going to be worse than if we partner. That being said, we know there are advocacy groups that are going to speak and be heard and have impacts on those performance measures as well. So to me, it's about getting everybody talking, discussing, understanding each other's viewpoints, but understanding that at the national level, there's not a lot of data out there that compares apples to apples, and also understanding the impact and having as few measures as feasible to start out with.
And Karen, to take that maybe to the next step, and in looking at what we're looking over there, maybe the discussion is not necessarily about the individual performance measures, because those are things that maybe we can advocate more flexibility, as Andrew mentioned earlier, where the states can have more flexibility in setting the performance measure that it's going to work for the particular locality that you are in. But what we are looking for are goal areas, because if we look at the goal areas, and the goal areas, could actually identify goal areas at the national level, such as, equity and inclusivity and mobility, but how we measure those in the particular localities could be slightly different based on what could really work in that area. So it goes again to something that Daniela mentioned earlier relative to, are we looking for better decision, tools rather than, the measures, and in order to, what are the goal areas? What are the areas that we are trying to improve? Because the reason we do performance management and we have performance measures is practically to go into some of the things that we have around this diagram, which is we wanna be making data-driven decisions. We wanna be making these decisions in full transparency as public agencies, and we want to be moving towards the right direction, but the right direction needs to be defined by the goal areas that we are looking to identify.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it seems like from seeing the comments as well as what people have shared that we have to organize this session is raising, which is one is we've talked quite a lot about, how do you actually fix or change the current federal measures and how they work to make it better for states. I think there's a bucket of that. There was a little bit of discussion about if there are ever new measures, let's do it better mechanically so that it works better for states. And then there's a third category, which is I think the category Christos and I were hoping to focus on, but where people have raised, what are just areas where we could do performance management better? Like, accessibility seems like the topic that's really come up the most, but equity as well and others. And how can, AASHTO, Federal Highways, be supportive in helping agencies advance on those topics under the TPM umbrella? It seems like we're, that they do fall into those. They're related, some of them, and so we need to keep them. We have to look at it together. But that's how I kind of. This is what I'm hearing. Yeah.
And I think, Yana, some really great points made here on the chat relative to, is 1 to 4 years enough time to really establish and make significant progress on a performance target, or should the target period be extended to 5 years? Personally, we are working on a 10-year plan in Rhode Island, and I think a lot of other states, if they are not already on a 10-year plan, they are moving towards a longer-term plan, action plan. I think now you can actually make plans as to how to meet. And part of the other question that I would put to everybody here is, should we be judged on a year by year, or should we be judged over the long-term period, over that 4 or 5 year performance period? So, because again, you could have, we all know that in statistics, there are years of aberration. And, do you just discount it and you watch for the trends, and a trend you need 2 or 3 years to establish rather than just one number? Or how do we look at all of this?
Yeah. I mean, I think Dave put a comment about, what is it that we're really trying to do, which I think is improve decision making, and what are the right questions to ask, and what needs to change to make that the alignment between the measure and the decisions to be better, because it clearly is important. Just in the few minutes left, I'd be curious, Pete Stefanos, if you're still on, what's your reaction to this discussion?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm connected by phone, so just my voice. That's good discussion. I mean, we've heard these comments before. I mean, we are all on this journey together. We started well before the rulemaking to get to work together as partners to try to figure out, okay, if we have national measures, how can they work in a way that doesn't just meet the national need but supports states? And you all provided us some great input that we were able to work together collaboratively on. In the rulemaking, we proposed some measures that we hope were supportive of that, and got lots of comments and tried to address those comments the best we could, but acknowledge and knew that this is new ground, and so particularly for the areas that are new, safety and bridge isn't new, so those are the measures that are probably working the best. And the areas that were new, we acknowledged in the rulemaking that we're going to have to reflect back after the first performance period to kind of take stock on, is this working, is it not working? And so we're committed to do that. We did, meet with AASHTO, probably 2 years ago, and said in AASHTO, I remember King G meeting with us and saying that, we need that to be sooner. It can't be after the first performance period. So there was an NCHRP project for there to be, as John, you're involved with, to kind of reach out to all the states and MPOs and ask, okay, what's working, what's not working, and put that into like a plan of things that could be addressed. So we're fully committed and willing to be responsive to that report that came out. But we also know that it's our responsibility to take action when it needs to be done. So we could envision, in maybe the near future, doing another rulemaking that would allow for opportunity to tweak or adjust or maybe even change these measures. We even talked about in 2 of the measures being sort of short term in duration, just because we knew we didn't have all the right data. We couldn't do it, so we did some research, on trying to get better data, and so we were hoping for a better measure down the road. And then, there is, the potential, greenhouse gas measure, NPRM is coming out. So there's going to be new measures that Congress or an administration wants to push that we need to support, and we try to do that in a way that isn't just DC and closed doors, making decisions that don't work for states. But we know it's new, and we don't really know until we start doing it if it's working or not. So ideally, before we implement a requirement, we actually have good research and data and evidence that something's going to work. It's not arbitrary, but in some cases, the way this was rolled out, we had no choice but to release some new sort of approaches that now we can evaluate and test. So I think there's great opportunity here. We've learned a lot. The equity definitely is on the forefront. Sort of, it's kind of built into everything. So it's kind of hard to think about, like, how do you measure that? But you can. We have, just through GIS systems now and spatial information, you can get a lot more information than we could have years ago. So anyway, I think it's been a good conversation. I would encourage AASHTO to work with us on the research work that's been done recently to identify where there are concerns and where there's opportunities, and we can see what we can do together to address them.
And Peter, I think I reflect, everybody on the leadership of the Committee on Performance-Based Management when I say that, we are ready and we are willing to work with Federal Highway and USDOT in the same manner that we worked, when we started, 5 and 6 years ago. We are ready, willing, and able, as we say the equity word, to start working and looking at some of the areas. And maybe part of the discussion that we are having here is not, we started by talking about the next generation performance measures. And then, as we saw, the question became, well, performance measures are really one of the decision-making tools. So, but before you need those, maybe we actually need to start looking at the goal areas that we need to be measuring. When we started, before we started with the ones that they were very mature, we looked at asset management, we looked at safety, and we looked at air quality. What are the new goal areas that they are important for states and they are important to the state DOTs and the federal government, that we want to start looking for improving where we are. And then we look at what are the applicable decision tools and performance measures for each one of those specific goal areas that we want to do. And again, this is where we really need to understand that sometimes we need to be looking at the overall goal that we want to achieve, rather than that, the cookie cutter approach of putting the same performance measure for everybody.
Christos, Yana, just a thought on this too. I think that we've got these things set up, and everybody's got this. You're supposed to improve upon your target and whatnot. I think at some point Congress is going to have to decide what is it they really want. If they want a national standard, tell us what it is, and then we can tell them what kind of money it's going to take to get there, and then they need to cough up the dough. We go through this because they don't want to give us the money, but then they want us to show improvement. Well, I think it's very simple in terms of we got to figure out, we know where we are in the world. It's been all in the news this week about where I think we rank like 13th in the world or something on infrastructure and falling. And if we want to be at a better place, let's go ahead and set that standard and then get the money in place to do it. And let's help them work and show them how to do this. We don't need these micromanaged measures here. I mean, in Virginia, we just completed a study. We're going to have regressive targets over the next 50 years for our pavement and bridges because we had to siphon off money so we can cover our special structures, our tunnels and big bridges. Typically in the past, those types of things might have been handled through a federal earmark. So we're having to do different things differently so we can get the funds available to it. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
So let me ask this question, and just a quick question. And Jan, I know we're running a little bit behind now, and I will take the time off at the end from what we would have had, not from any of the other updates that we have to go through. Just I think this is an area that it's important to continue the dialogue, and we'll be happy to work with the, both as the Committee on the Performance-Based Management, but also as part of our TRB and AASHTO committees to maybe organize brainstorming sessions around this, that we can have more dedicated time and we can take individual goal areas and put our heads together as to how we could, are they important enough for us to have state measures? Are they important enough to have national measures? And how do we go around it so that we still retain the flexibility that we need to have?
Sounds good. I think this has been a terrific start to a dialogue that's going to be ongoing. So thank you, everybody.
Again, as we wrap this up, feel free to drop additional comments or send us an email with ideas. We'll continue compiling this and moving them forward. So with that, Perry, maybe we can move to the Committee on Performance-Based Management business. And again, thank you very much for the great discussion that we just had. I really hope that we can continue this discussion and continue to be identified. I'm hoping that all of us are aligned on what the North Star is. And then it's just a matter of aligning what our goal areas are. So I want to start by saying thank you to all of the subcommittee chairs and co-chairs and vice chairs for all of the work that they do for the Committee on Performance-Based Management, and all of the members of the individual, subcommittees. Without the work that is being done by these groups, it's really, we wouldn't be able to provide you with the value that we provide today. Again, two people that we really want to thank a lot is Matt Harty from AASHTO. We want to thank Susanna and Steve for the collaboration and the coordination that we've had in moving things forward, both at the Committee on Performance-Based Management, but also for the Transportation Pool Fund. With that, let's move forward with the working group chairs and their updates. So next slide, please. Daniela and Jay, I know you are limited and you have to go in and out, so we'll start with your update.
Okay, this is Daniela Bringer, Bostad DOT, and with me is Jay. Jay, you want to say something? Make sure we can hear you.
No, I'm on. So.
Okay. Okay, so this was a very invigorating conversation we just had. I think it's really great to know that us old timers, or should we say long timers, old timers? I'm not sure what's the appropriate word here. I'm not sure, Chris, that's what we call ourselves. Okay, long timers. I still have a lot of energy and zeal and enthusiasm left to talk about performance measures, especially the emerging ones that are challenging us so much. So my subcommittee, Jay and my subcommittee that we are leading, is about emerging technologies. Go figure, right? And system mobility. So we're dealing with the hard to measure stuff. We've been dealing with the hard to measure stuff for some time, and it hasn't gotten much easier to measure. So with that sort of pre-word here, I'm just going to jump right into our short presentation about the work of our subcommittee. Again, it's a joint subcommittee. It was created between two standing committees, and I'm not going to go through great detail here, but you can see the Committee on Transportation System Operations and the Committee on Performance-Based Management jointly owning, sponsoring this joint subcommittee. Next slide. So the committee was created to work collaboratively across a couple AASHTO committees. We also have an informal relationship with the Committee on Data Management Analytics, because analytics is a very important part of mobility analysis. So it makes only sense that our committee has a close relationship with CDMA. But we were created in part to deal with the tricky issue of mobility measures. We understand MAP 21 measures were created with a national purview in mind. We also understand DOTs necessarily not using those measures to measure the operational mobility efficiencies. So we have always recognized that MAP 21 has a limited sort of application, but we're also recognizing that we need day-to-day measures that we can help us manage our system more efficiently. So on top of that, we are dealing with automated transportation, right? We're dealing with the emerging mobility issues and technology issues. So this committee is embracing that. Because of that, we have a very broad scope of responsibilities and sometimes a little bit too much. So there's always something happening, and we always seem to try to, at least focus our memberships, involvement and volunteers on some of the critical issues. And I will talk to some of the critical issues in a minute. Next slide. Just a quick, what we did last year, we did really a lot of COVID-related work. COVID was really a center in helping mobility metrics and operational data, like throughput and VMT, to be used to understand the importance or the adherence to COVID regulations in different states. And so we became, at least the topic of mobility analysis became the forefront in the center of national attention, which was great in some ways and not so good in other ways, because we are realizing our limitations. So we put a lot of effort into this whole notion of how do we use our operational data that we have in our DOTs to make some really significant policy decisions, or underscoring the decision-making process that took place on the governor's or legislative level, and to see if these policies, staying at home orders were effective. So a lot of our data was used in this way, which was great. So a lot of DOTs got a lot of attention really quickly from the press and the media. We also did an analysis because we want to understand what other technology, AV, CAT, CAV-related committees exist under AASHTO, under TRB, under other groups. Nationally, we found an inventory of 48 national committees, subcommittees, work groups that deal with CAV, AV, CAT. So you can understand that we kind of were a little bit challenged figuring out where our subcommittee can be most effective, or how we can create the most bang for the buck. So that led us then to the next effort we did last year. We developed a research proposal to create a strategic planning effort and basically a roadmap for our subcommittee. What should we tackle? Where's our effort most best placed in order to kind of leverage our resources, our limited resource that we have? So next slide. So in 2021, we already did a lot of good stuff. We have been busy. We worked with, Rich Taylor, and we helped co-sponsor 4 best practice workshops on MAP 21 system congestion measures, PM3 metrics. Great workshop. I participated in 1 or 2 of those. Jay took some of those. We kind of split and divided up a little bit where we participated. But a really great discussion on the PM3 measures, limitations, issues, especially in the light of COVID, data resets, baseline resets, and all of that. Great conversation. We also partnered with the National Center of Operations Center of Excellence That's the CTSO side of our house, our committee side. Under data governance and TISMO peer exchange, which also focused on mobility and emerging technology data. So it was a 3-day session, was really great. Peer exchange, it was by invitation only, so it was somewhat limited. We couldn't really announce it broadly to our members, but we participated actively on that as well. And then we got great news that our project 2123 was funded, our request for, and that will be, that's the formation of the research roadmap committee is underway. So the panel is, I think, completed. I'm not sure yet. I haven't heard back yet, but we understand that's going forward. And then we also were really heavily involved, and this goes right to the conversation that Jana led for us on, and Christos, on what decisions do we need to make, what measures do we need. We've been really actively involved along with some of our partner, Kristen Hyde from Minnesota DOT. She and I collaboratively work closely together to work with CTSO and all the other AASHTO committees on updating the CAB, CAT, and policy principles that were adopted under AASHTO in 2019. Next slide. So we are proposing, there used to be 5 principles, and because emerging technologies and all these mobility issues we are facing really sort of expanding the purview of where we need to have some policy positions as AASHTO at being a leader, a national leader, right? We want to be talking about these policy priorities on the national level. We want to be able to communicate about this with, the reauthorization that's going on, different policy proposals, legislative proposals, both in the House and Senate. A lot of stuff is going on right now. We have to have a voice. And so the 5 policy principles we used to have were not really meeting all of those policy criteria that are emerging. And this goes right to this issue of performance measures. So we are expanding our policy principles or policy priorities. We're going to need to figure out a way how to measure how we're achieving those. So yes, I think this conversation is really relevant, and it's also, cross-functional in so many different ways with other committees. And so this work is going on. I thought we had a conversation today at this, but I think that was Matt and I had a little bit of miscommunication. But you've probably been part of a committee meeting where we talked about these principles. We're just wrapping up a 2-month review period, and we got a ton of feedback. So Krista and I will go back, and we're going to incorporate Matt when he gets back from vacation. We're going to incorporate and look at all the feedback we had. We like to bring this to the board of directors in the fall, so we have to work pretty diligently during the summer to go through the internal AASHTO procedures in order to get approval to come to the board. Next slide. Some of the things we're looking at doing this year. There are a couple other intercommittee working groups under AASHTO that were created to bring some, synergy around some topics: electrification, electric vehicles, drones, shared mobility, mass. You're probably aware with these terms. We don't yet have any relationship to them. There may be some interest for us on our mobility side to work with them on some specific topics, but right now we have yet to undertake that work. We've been asked to consider doing the COVID-19 data survey again that we did last year to understand what DOTs are using to answer these questions. There were some questions raised in certain terms of if this event last year helped DOTs to make a case for data, operational data. I don't know, maybe the impact of that. Was it good? Was it bad? Did it help the budget? We'd like to hear more about that. Was it one-time only thing? So we might refresh the survey. And then again, we're really interested to work with the National Operations Center of Excellence to potentially do some case studies where we take traditional data points for non-traditional decision-making processes like COVID, stay-at-home orders. We use data that was not meant for that kind of analysis, but yet we're collecting it, we're using it for making decisions that had really traditionally not been related to this kind of data that we're using in a mobility analysis side. So that was really interesting, maybe with some case studies on the horizon. And then we continue our subcommittee meetings, trying to figure out who we can partner with in TRB, and then also reaching out to all the subcommittees and working groups under both standing committees. Next slide. Before we close, I want to pass on to Jay if he has anything to add, but here's our contact information. This is how you can get involved. We had a meeting yesterday, really interesting. Also want to point out the US DOT has a request for information out. There's like 24 questions on how we can measure equity. I think many of you are involved in this in your DOTs. It did not come to this standing committee as a request, but I think it should, because a lot of our members here deal with data on a daily basis. So they're looking for ways that we can measure equity in transportation, and very challenging questions, actually. But I think a lot of DOTs are right now trying to figure out how to help AASHTO put a survey out, help AASHTO answer some of those questions US DOT has posed, because we know this is an important issue for the administration. We do want to be responsive to that. So there are a lot of sort of questions that touch on mobility, So I would suggest to AASHTO maybe expand the survey to this standing committee to include them as well. Jay, do you have any other comments that are anything I missed?
Jen, Daniela. Yep. Go ahead, Jay.
Maybe he cannot answer right now.
So thank you so much for all the work and for pushing, this forward. The work on policy that you've been doing, it's really great. And I hope everybody had the opportunity to review and provide feedback. In the interest of time, I'm actually going to move all of the questions for all of the subcommittees and groups at the end. And I'm going to turn it over to Anne-Marie McDonald, who will give us an update from the Asset Management Subcommittee. Anne-Marie?
Thank you, Christos. Thank you to my neighbor. Quick update from the Asset Management Subcommittee. Am I able to move it, or Perry? Thank you. On the minds of many people at the state, and probably many of you are already aware, but just to state that the annual consistency review, this is the implementation documentation, is due by June 30th. I know we're actively working on that ourselves. And for everyone, if you're not already aware, but the next TAMP due in 2022, people are already starting to see what that means. And Federal Highway, along with AASHTO, put together the mini series. There were 8 consecutive weeks of book club topics, and this is using the AASHTO TAM guide. So hopefully you were able to participate, and if you were not, those video recordings are available and they're online. And I have to say, going into this, I was like, oh, every week, what's this going to be about? But there were a lot of keen insights, and with practitioners and what they're using, and really the leaders on each of those topics that were really helpful on how we're preparing for the next TAMP. So especially a lot of DOTs we're finding, we heard on our regional call, a couple of the states have all new staff, and other states, part of their staff are new. So those deep dive topics are really, really helpful. Let's go on to the next. And the TAM guide, a reminder that AASHTO TAM guide, the online portal, is available to everyone. So if you're working with an MPO or a town or remotely, and you're not on your work computer, you can access that guide. So that's really useful. Next slide. Thanks, Perry. Matt Halbrook sends his regards, and a quick reminder, the National TAM Conference is taking place in a virtual format this August, and they have 3 tracks that he's detailed on the slide here for you. They are finalizing the program still, but a key thing to realize that early registration is July 10th, that ends. Many state DOTs via pooled fund do have slots available for where their registration is covered. So if you have any questions on that, or mark your calendars and make sure people at your agencies, because we are finding with a lot of things, we can reach a really great audience, a large audience on a lot of topics through the virtual format. And that is through TRB. So you see the link there, but if you search TRB and 13th National Conference, you can get to that site. Next slide. Wanted to show you, I mentioned the webinars. Here you see some of the topics, our wonderful TAM portal, and those are up there, but just so that you can see, this is the website that you go through the TAM portal and on each of those. Next slide, please. Okay, so we are right in the middle of working on a lot of collaboration on research along with TRB, Asset Management Committee, ABJ 30, currently working on research needs statements. As Mara talked about, a lot of research, they're not all in silos. A lot of TAM research integrates and crosses with other areas. So there may be some key statements that our people on our committee might reach out to you and vice versa. And I think as part of this forum, they'll talk about some of those research initiatives. There are 2 projects that are just coming through to fruition now that Matt asked me to share with you. Enhancements to that TAM guide. What's great about the digital format is that you can add and build on it, and as we build with maturity and experience, we can do so with the guide. So that's getting started. He thinks the panel's been selected, and then they're selecting the panel on TAM and TSMO, a very important topic at a lot of our agencies, and particularly with mobility. And if you haven't heard, the TRB committee, and we're working with them with the AASHTO subcommittee, they've launched a competition. The general theme is about challenges in transportation and asset management. And I'm pleased to say the 2021 theme is on social equity in TAM. This contest is focused on young members and students. There's different areas of categories for them to get engrossed and look at this topic and maybe explore, and from whatever work they do for this competition, it might help us in many areas to see. Dr. Torres Machi, maybe you know Christina from the University of Colorado at Boulder. She's heading that up. There's a link there. Those are due by September, and they have a chance to present papers at TRB, as well as to have their coverage to the next in-person TAM National Conference. So that's really exciting if you know any people who may want to touch on that. And that doesn't just have to be highway, that can be anything in asset management. So that's a quick snapshot from our subcommittee. Let's go down to the next slide. As always, what we're focused on, we're here so you can contact us, join our meetings. We'd love for you to participate. And I'll turn it back to you, Christos.
Christos, should I just go ahead?
Yes, please. Actually, I was saying thank you, Diana. I was saying thank you to Anne-Marie and my neighbor, and thanking her and and Matt for their great work. So, Diana, I'll turn it over to you and Charlie.
Okay,
And
I'm sure your dog. I'm sure your
microphone on this time.
Yep, we will go quickly, and I'm sure your dog appreciated you thanking all of us. Okay, so we will go quickly. We know we're running out of time a bit. We like to start organizational management here with our mission and goals, but I'll just quickly remind you we're trying to help agencies achieve organizational excellence and performance excellence, and we want to do this by improving organizational performance in strategic, tactical, and operational levels of the organization. And we have 3 goals listed here. We would like to do this in the most efficient and effective way. We also will share organizational models and leadership structures, and you guys can all read that, and also provide agencies with best practices in process and quality improvement. Next slide. Our meetings are on the 3rd Tuesday of the month from 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Central. Anyone who's not in the Midwest has to translate that time. co-chair with Charlie Purcell of Iowa DOT, so we take advantage of publishing that in Central Time. We have Matt Hardy as our liaison, and we have a new FHWA liaison, Alexis Kuklinski. Sorry, I'm trying to talk quickly. This is due to the reorg at FHWA. We're delighted to have Alexis, though. She will be joining us. And we have our strategic partnership with AJE15, TRB Committee, Workforce Development and Organizational Excellence, with Victoria Beal as the co-chair, and it's a very nice fit with our committee. Next slide. We are organized around 3 activities. Activity 1, process improvement, led by Gary Vansich of Colorado DOT. Much of this work is built around the community of practice called the Transportation Lean Forum. They have webinars every other month. The last one was in May and had presentations from Illinois, Michigan, and Saskatchewan, and you can actually get that webinar at the archived site there on our slide. The next webinar is scheduled for July 13th, and it's going to be the 9th anniversary of the Transportation Lean Forum, so that is super exciting. 11 a.m. Here I put it into Eastern time for you all. Gary publishes his in Mountain Time, and maybe Greenwich Mean Time, but 11 a.m. to 12:15 p.m. Central. And at least of last check, they are still gathering speakers for that. So if you are willing, able, or have a great idea, I think you can send it on to Gary. And if they are full now, could be for the next one. Next slide. Activity 2, non-system performance measures. I attempt to lead this activity. I'll go with the second bullet first. This year we submitted an NCHRP synthesis study to look at project and program delivery measures used for decision making in state DOTs. We will be resubmitting that for next year. There was some sort of technical snafu and it went into a database that they're no longer using, so no one saw our excellent proposal. We will try again next year. But now we are considering doing some work on customer-centered measures, potentially tying to public value creation, and we are going to see how that shakes out. But those are my ideas for this next year. And now I will turn it over to Charlie. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Deanna. So for our third activity that we have going on in our organizational management subcommittee has to do with supporting the agency capability building portal. And this is a product of a recent research project through NCHRP that produced both a guidebook and a portal. And so we've been carrying the flag on that and trying to continue support the use of those research products. One thing that we've been doing is we've applied for and received funding for an implementation project to continue the implementation of that research project. And we are currently awaiting the start of that. We anticipate that the panel formation will begin fairly soon, and we've been doing a little bit of early recruiting to identify potential panel members. If you might be interested in participating, I'll tell you a little bit about this implementation project. First of all, it involves getting some more, just publicizing the resources a little bit more broadly, but the really key part of this implementation is recruiting several DOTs to serve as pilot projects. And similar to the thing that Mara mentioned in her presentation earlier, where they had 5 DOTs that kind of test drove the roadmap creation process through that integration project. This is kind of a similar idea where we're looking for several state DOTs to sort of test drive the resources that are available through this research project, specifically the ACB portal. And so if you're interested in that, please let me know. That's going to be one of the important aspects of this implementation project. So you might be able to get some free assistance from the research team to help you use that portal to solve some real world problems or challenges that relate to building the capability of your transportation agency. Also under this activity here, we're planning some initial outreach to some other AASHTO committees where there's going to be natural connections with this type of work. So next slide, please. So how can you get involved in our committee? We are a friendly bunch and we welcome anybody to come and join us. We have a monthly committee meetings that are shown at the time there. We had somebody join us just out of the blue, and we were very welcome to do that last time around, and they had found the information about that on the TPM portal. So as you may know, on the TPM portal, there is information about each of the AASHTO organizational management subcommittees, including ours. And this person had found we had links there to our monthly webinar meeting, and they joined us, and we were glad to have them. So encourage you to come check it out if you might be interested in seeing what our committee is all about. We also have some other resources there on our webpage, so you can see what we've been talking about at recent meetings and see if that might be something interest to you. So please reach out to myself or Deanna if you would like to get involved.
We're less rushed at our meetings. So
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christos. Thank you.
Well, Charlie and Deanna, thank you so much. And my apologies for rushing through with this and trying to stay as close to the agenda as possible. I would have felt really bad if it wasn't happening even when Tim is running the meeting. So maybe part of what we need to consider is going to 3 hours. So with that, I see that Jean is already ready, and I'll turn it over to Jean for an update on risk management.
Much, Christos, and I'm hoping that we don't have to go to 3 hours, as much as I love these webinars. Anyway, I'm going to just hit the highlights on the first slide here and say that our mission and goals are still consistent with what they have been in previous webinars. You can take a quick look through them. I just want to acknowledge my vice chair, co-chair, Nathan Lee from Utah DOT, who isn't able to join us today, unfortunately, but he is an amazing co-chair that really helps keep us going on track here too. In addition, we have Matt Hardy as our liaison, of course, and then Daniel Federa as our FHWA liaison. Next slide, please. Most of our activities in our subcommittee right now are in response to or in support of research projects, or helping to manage research projects that are actually supporting our subcommittee. The first one, NCHRP 20-12304, is actually a support contract to develop a strategic research plan and a risk research roadmap for the committee. And so we've had several meetings with the subcommittee itself to talk through different ideas, give some feedback and input on what our priorities should be for research. And we're coming down to maybe, I should say it's still a long short list of research priorities. We're making a lot of great progress. And we are actually looking for participation in a risk management research roadmap workshop that is going to be planned for early August. That doesn't necessarily need to be limited to risk practitioners. It can be kind of anybody who might have an interest in risk, although of course risk practitioners and experts are also welcome. It's also, from my understanding, not just limited to state DOTs. So if you're interested in that, I would say you could reach out to me. You could reach out to Mara Campbell, who is our PI on this project, and hopefully join us too. The next project, NCHRP 23-09, is a big one that we're working on that we co-sponsored with CTSSR. We've had 2 big workshops held in March and April with members of our subcommittee, CTSSR, and the subcommittee on asset management participating. And we also had an interim project meeting last week with the project panel. Lots of good progress being made on there. Still a long ways to go. We realized that what we're really trying to do is build a framework for this scoping effort, or this not necessarily a highway standard, but really a framework for conducting an all hazards risk and resilience analysis. And I think we're leading into a really good place with this. It's certainly something that folks are anxious for now, given the focus on risk and resilience. So we're trying to find ways to identify some low-hanging fruit or activities that can be done quickly in support of this activity and keep it moving forward. 23-15, the prioritization of risks related to connected and automated vehicles and emerging technologies. The project panel has selected a contractor, but the contract hasn't yet been executed to my knowledge, so work has not yet started on that one. Next slide, please. I know Tammy Haas is going to cover this information probably as well, but I want to put a plug in for the 2 new projects that were selected for funding under the FY22 NCHRP program, because they're both related to risk management. And what I really want to do is put a plug in for people who are interested in participating to nominate themselves by the end of this month. These are very important efforts. Again, you don't necessarily need to be an expert in risk, but if you're interested, if you want to learn more, if you want to connect with other risk practitioners and give ideas on how we should be doing this better, nominate yourself for either of these projects. The first one is developing methods to allow agencies to incorporate quantitative risk assessment at the project and network level. And the next one is building risk management momentum in agencies, which is really helping us to support that 20-12304 project about our risk research roadmap and strategic planning too. A couple upcoming activities I want to point out specifically is our next bi-monthly meeting is scheduled for Monday, August 9th, 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern. At that meeting, we're going to be having a discussion on what state DOTs are doing or thinking about for their next TAMP update regarding risk management. And that's very timely, as has been already mentioned, because it is right before the TRB TAM conference begins on August 10th. So you can make it a whole week of risk and asset management, and we'll start that week off right with our phone call on August 9th. And I also want to point out our link to the portal site is listed there as well. I think that's all I have for updates. So Christos, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Jean, thank you so much. And thank you again for all of the work that you have been doing with Nathan on risk management. Very impressive. With that, I'll turn it over to Tammy and William for an update on our research subcommittee.
Good afternoon. Since we're running so far behind, you guys can read our mission statement. Important things to remember is William and Tammy's email. Next slide. So Jean Carney already touched on this. What I want to say is please self-nominate for one of those top 2 research projects. We've submitted synthesis, but they were not selected. Those are the 2 titles. Next slide. These are different opportunities for submitting research. They're on the regular calendar basis. The focus of the rest of the presentation today is going to be on proposed NCHRP topics that we need to get submitted by November 1st, and the AASHTO committee needs to really identify which ones will submit by November 1st. Next slide. We can kind of skip this, but we've already talked about the TAM portal, the roadmap, and the next activity we're going to do is talking about those FY23 research problem statements being developed in consultation with the AJE 30 Asset Management Committee. Next slide. Next slide. William, are you on? Do you want to cover?
I am on. Just quickly, I encourage everybody to look at this slide presentation. It has all of the research statements that are being developed. The one key message that you should have besides look at this presentation is we still need volunteers to help further develop the synthesis topics, or sorry, research topics as a whole. So if you take a look at those, as Tammy said, her email, my email, let us know if you're interested in helping further refine those topics. If we have nobody in doing the further refinement of those topics, we're probably just going to store them in the research management system for further use. That's it, Tammy.
Christos, we're done. So everybody just look at the presentation and let us know if you're interested in helping out. Thanks.
Yep. So Tammy and William, thank you so much. As I promised, we're going to try and keep us on time. So what I have to say on the TPM pool fund business, it's not that I don't like talking about it, but it ends up like, we shortchange it all the time. However, a lot of the work that we see in these webinars is as a result of the TPM pool fund, which is going to be superseded over the next year by AASHTO's transportation service program. So, please consider signing up for that as well, because that is what's going to allow us to continue the work that we are doing now through the TPM pooled fund in the future. So I encourage you to go to the TPM portal for all of the information from the pooled fund, and also to be reading our quarterly newsletters that hopefully you are getting in your mailbox. So next slide, please. And actually what we're gonna do, since we're gonna skip that, we're gonna go straight to Karen, our indispensable secretary, who's going to help us with the review of our action item, starting with, we need to review the time for how long this quarterly webinar needs to be. Karen?
So can you hear me?
Yes.
So lots and lots of ways to engage and things to check out. The Federal Highway TPM dashboards, the Management Integration Guidebook when it gets published, to be able to take the assessment and create and work your roadmap. As thoughts and ideas come to you on the future performance measures, contact Christos, email him. He's going to be the collector of all that. And you just heard from all the subcommittees and all the great work that's being done. So encourage you and any other staff to get involved. Pick a subcommittee or several and listen to a few meetings. You do not have to be a member of the Committee on Performance-Based Management to participate in these. We want all states involved. And that's it.
Karen, thank you very much. With that, that concludes our meeting for today. I would like to thank all of our attendees, both from the AASHTO Committee on Performance-Based Management, our chair, Tim Hengel, for providing us with a vision and strategy and guidance, to Steve Gay, Nelson Hoffman, Bill Bowles, and Mara Campbell for our feature presentation. And of course our subcommittee and working group chairs and vice chairs. But I also want to thank, Yana Park and Perry Lubin and Spyboard Partners for continuously organizing these webinars for us and for the great work that they are providing us with. Any notes and materials from these meetings will be sent to all of the meeting attendees and will also be posted on the TPM portal. Thank you, everyone. A wonderful weekend ahead to everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.